Cool, cool. Okay, it is 2:15, so we're already running late, and I have like about 110 slides to kick off. So buckle up. This will be fun. Um, so before we start, like some disclaimers, I will teach you some stuff, and you need to be responsible with it. So whatever you do is for your own responsibility, not for mine. Please join the Slido. So if you go to https ://sly.do and you use the hashtag NCL 2020, you will get into a Q&A screen where I can directly react upon your questions. And if I don't, just shout in the group if you are able to. Okay. So one of my first questions is like the people that are watching, I like to interact with them. Do you already code? So are you a programmer? Are you coding Python or whatever? Either tell me or put it in the group.
I guess I'll go. I know how to code a little bit, nothing really advanced. I know a few languages, basic stuff.
Yeah, I think that is very important to have like a basis in coding. There's like things, Code Academy, where you can learn the basics. And if you already know how the different structures in a specific program work, you're able to translate that and like query your way into a new language. So if you know one, you can easily switch to another. You have to dive into it, but I still do have to dive into it. I see Anonymous, some experience with Python and C. Yeah, I started off with assembly, but I think Python is a really cool way, really easy for people to learn, that allows you to interact with hardware as well. And C is like perfect for optimized other stuff. Another question is, do you break? So are you doing hacking, playing CTFs, working in info security? Have some experience there?
I'm learning, starting to try to get experience, hopefully a job soon.
Okay. So how do you build up experience? Is it like watching videos or doing CTF or?
I've been watching videos. I've been doing OSINT CTFs and just asking my friends if I can run vulnerability assessments on their websites, stuff like this, and trying to turn it into, a rationale for why is this relevant, what I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah, that's very helpful. Like getting your network involved for helping you out. Especially like things where you can play with stuff, look at vulnerable machines. I myself, when I started, I used Certified Secure, which is a CTF environment where you can first learn things by doing trivia questions, and then you break into websites by using SQL exploits and doing other kind of vulnerability, and then you change from like being the attacker to becoming the incident response guy by looking at PCAP files to see what communication is over there, and then you are switching over to hardening by creating more secure code. So you have the entire posture of InfoSec. And that's a free environment, and I think their business model is selling videos to tell you more about that ID.
Cool.
So next one is, do you tinker? And tinker as in, are you joining a makerspace or building stuff yourself, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, ESP32, whatever? So Daniel joined as well. Hey, Daniel.
Yeah. Hey. I've done a bit of stuff with Raspberry Pi, but nothing too in depth.
Yeah, I think the Raspberry Pi is really a game changer, especially for schools that do not have a lot of budget, where they can simply have a small circuit board and just connect it to any random screen, have a micro USB adapter, a photo card, and they're home free. So, but you see that it's being more and more used, even in more advanced attacks where red teams use it to leave it as a device behind to get a posture into the network. So although it was initially meant to train children, it's being embraced by the entire community. This is one where you have to just shout. I will show you a lot of devices with certain ports, like this is this is an Apple Lightning cable. So I will show you ports, and if you just say whatever port it is, then I have an ID of the people that are joining the stream. So first one.
Oh, USB.
That's a USB, correct. This one is harder, so it's not related to computers.
But the
MIDI port by
audio.
any chance?
Yeah, it looks like audio, but it's basically a DMX connector, which is used for both light and also for lightning shows or for fireworks shows. So it allows you to do timing based controls. This is a connector on the side and has 4 wires, a red, a black, a yellow, and a white one. And it allows you to interact like simple devices together, like it's on the side of such devices, allowing you to add extra functionality. So unless you're familiar with it, you probably won't know.
Is that HDMI?
No, it's not HDMI. HDMI is more like for adding a screen to it. This is a Grove connector. So the Grove connector is for allowing sensors being added to the device or keyboards or all other kind of stuff. So this one, don't think of it too hard. So it's something that I photographed of a laptop.
Is that a power port?
That's the power port. Yeah, it is. So this one is a little bit harder, or a bit harder, where you have like the circuit board. And if you look at the bottom of the circuit board, you might see a couple of pins. So this is something that you would know if you're really into hardware hacking and already have experience with this kind of stuff. Okay, this is the JTAG port, and the JTAG port is used for programming devices, so putting the software onto the hardware. So a television is able to switch channels, or a washing machine is able to have certain programs on it. There's a small connector next to it, which is also hard. Don't feel bad about it. I will just show you, but like sometimes people are shouting out all these names, and then I know, oh, I already have very advanced hardware hackers in this stream, so I have to up my game a bit. So this is the UART port, and the UART port is a console port. So whenever you start up a computer, usually like a PC or Linux machine, you will see all this text scrolling up, like showing there's a hard disk inside this computer, and there's a amount of memory. This kind of information is being showed on the smaller pins, the UART pins. So if you have a device and you are able to connect to one of these ports, you're able to interact with the device itself. So this one will be a harder one as well. So this is also a UART port. So it's also a console port, but sometimes vendors will disguise these ports as like an audio port. So this is a 2.5 millimeter jack plug the same one that you would use for your headphones, but it is actually not an audio plug, but it will conceal a console port where you are able to interact with the device. This one, and this is a device that I connect to my Xbox 360.
Is that a MIDI port?
Yeah, exactly. That's a MIDI port. So this is a keyboard that allows you to play piano into Guitar Hero, and you can also connect it to a computer. So this is a MIDI port. A MIDI allows you to send music over a certain protocol, and people were able to play music over the internet, although they were not physically together, but using this MIDI protocol. So this one, these are hard disks. So this is the back of a hard disk. So there's usually a red cable connected to these.
Is it SATA?
Yeah, it is SATA. But next to the SATA connector, so there's the small one is the data, and the big one is the power, but there's also 4 pins next to this specific hard disk. What are these pins? This is actually also UART. So although this device is meant to be used inside the computer to store information, there's also like a connector to it that you can interact with the device. This one, this is a LED panel. So these are NeoPixels, which are RGB LEDs, and it's a matrix of 8 by 8, so 64 different RGB LEDs, and they can be addressed by the computer. And there's a ground, VCC, and 1 data wire. So my question is do you know what the name is of the protocol of that specific connection? And the name already reveals it a bit. So the name of this protocol is actually 1 wire. So where you have like MIDI, there's also one that just has 1 wire, and it's called 1 wire. So this one, where is it used for?
Is it a VGA?
No. If you look at the VGA on a computer, that will actually have 15 pins, so 3 rows, and this one has just 9 pins. So this is something that you would usually see on older computers, on desktop computers, on routers. So this is an RS-232 port, which is a serial port. This one, and this one you will find in your car. If you remove the ashtray, or it's maybe in your glove department. And this is a connector that allows you to interact with your car. And actually, oh, I got a book today on interacting with my car. So happy to read that one after this stream. Any idea of the name of this connection? Okay, this is ODB2. And ODB2 is the connector where you can interact with the car, and the car is using CAN bus. And it is a protocol where whenever you turn on your windshield wipers, it will say 24, 24, 24, 24, 24, and your windshield wipers are listening to all the data that's coming in, and if they see a 24, it will actually turn the windshield wiper. So people have been reverse engineering these, as vendors will probably not tell you what are the specific codes are for. So there was a Kickstarter project where someone asked you to record all the data that was going over this bus while recording a video of what you were doing, like opening a door, like pushing the brake, like pushing the horn or whatever, to discover all the specific codes from the specific cars. This one, which is the bottom of a router. So this is a circuit board, and you see some metal connections at the end, and it's 8 pins per connector. So what is the name of the connector, or what is it used for? The name is an RJ45, and it's used for Ethernet. So this is like your LAN cable where you connect a device to the internet, for instance, or to your local network. So a little bit about myself. My name is Jilles Groenendijk, and I work for Deloitte in the Netherlands, in Den Haag, and I am a hardware hacker. So what I do is different things. So I create gadgets for the red team, like keyloggers, data persistent access on the network, malicious devices that are used for red teaming. Red teaming is a certain action where you test if all your monitoring is working correctly. So what you do is you monitor the security inside of your network, but you want to see if that actually works for you. So by doing so, you actually need someone to hack you, but you want to be not being breached. So this is like a training thing. And the red and the blue teams is like in gaming, like the red one is the attacking side and the blue one is the defending side. So that's one thing that I do. I do hardware hacking assignments. So what I do is I tear apart hardware. So I open up devices, look at the insides, look at the chips to see if there's any vulnerabilities inside this hardware, and I suggest like improvements for the device to help people secure their devices before they are going to market. I run and maintain a blue team platform. So there's like one of the previous speakers talked about SIEM solutions. That's like stuff that we do as well. And I host like security awareness, both digital and physical access controls. So it's like opening doors by cloning cards. That's like using lockpicking to open doors, that kind of stuff. So I have some movies that really inspire me, like the Q in James Bond is like the thing that I do for the red team, creating the cool gadgets. It's not as fancy as Q. The one on the top right is Sneakers, which is about a red team assignment where people breach a bank, but they also do hardware hacking inside. Then there's war games on the left, where you have people monitoring everything. It's like the blue team, and Terminator 2, where there's like the John is breaching into a bank, I believe, using a Palm Pilot. So most of the stuff that I do because I tinker my entire life. So I took apart everything that I ever had in my hand, making my parents very, drive them really crazy. So my grandfather used to have a box where I could take like a hardware out and take it apart, and that time was like a radio with the glass components inside, and I could break it and make something new out of it, and that is what actually helped me learn and enter this business. So what you see on this picture is one of the first things that I did is I built a LED board, the one with Change Me connect to the LED board, and I made this out of a train station sign which I could buy like very cheap for €5, but the devices I could not use myself. So a friend of mine taught me how to hack the hardware, and it was like 6-7 years ago. So what he said is, do you have like a chip off machine? No, I do not have a chip off machine. Do you cook? Yeah, I sometimes cook. Do you have a creme brulee torch? I do have a creme brulee torch. So he said, get me the creme brulee torch. So what we did is we heat up the chip and we smacked the device on the board, and the chip fell off, and we were able to like bypass the entire security of the device, add a new microcontroller to it, and make this board interactive and make it do whatever we wanted it to do. The one on the right, which is the board that is used in Stranger Things, the Netflix series, where Joyce is looking for her son, and the only way to interact with him is using a Ouija board, using the lights that are in her house. And I was walking around on Comic-Con, and I saw this lady carrying this cardboard thing with all the Christmas light and all the letters on it. So I asked her, is it interactive? She says, I'm sorry? I said, is it interactive? Can I interact with it? So I do not know what you mean. I said, thank you for the ID. So I run home. I bought a small microcontroller for €2. I bought a LED string for €8. And for €10, I was able to create a thing where you just could log in to the board using your mobile phone and make it say whatever you want. So if you would say hello, it could say hello. And of course, it had already the sentences from the series as well in as a default, like a run right here, help me. The one in the middle, in the bottom, is as I'm also doing physical security, is like opening doors, using lockpick tools, using other special tools. I'm part of an organization called TOOL with 3 O's, which is the open organization of lockpickers. Let me turn this a little bit so I'm not as red as I am. During that conference, I tend to leech a lot. So just listening to the presentations of others and not contributing any of my knowledge. So what I thought was I want to have a presentation at that conference. So, and I want to make it like an epic one, like Hollywood style. So whenever you see someone breaking into a secure room, they come up with this device that will show numbers on the device that is breaking the lock and then opening the door. This is something that I want to build myself. So a colleague of mine was working on this Z-Wave lock, and when he was done with his assignment, I tried to figure out how this was working, and by recording the signals that were going over the one wire in this particular lock and replaying these exact signals, I was able to brute force this lock. So what I did is I drilled a hole in the front of the lock, so on the outside of the house. I connected 2 little wires to the cable connecting the front panel to the back panel, and I was able to inject my codes in to the communication between the locks. And every try took 0.9 seconds. So in presumably 3 or 4 hours, you would be able to open the lock. So another thing is on the bottom left, which is a device that will deface Bluetooth glasses. So you sometimes see people wearing these Bluetooth glasses, and I'm the coolest, and I'm the best, and whatever, using Bluetooth. And I want to learn how Bluetooth works. So with a couple of friends from all over the world, like someone from Japan, someone from America, and we were from the Netherlands. We made a proof of concept where you could, if you were in the vicinity of such a Bluetooth glasses, you were able to change the text to whatever you wanted it to happen, just because there was no security at all. So you could just connect to the glasses and send your new image to the glasses. I'm a father of two twins, so they're here in the Minecraft hoodie. So it's Jelle and Jurre, and they had a hard time at school because yeah, it was hard to learn technical things. So they were quite early done with their lessons and just yeah, annoyed or bored at school. So I decided to help. So I worked 2 days in, or 4 days in telecom in data centers, where I worked 2 days on Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday was my day off, where I volunteered to work at school. And then Thursday and Friday, I worked at the data center again. And during this time, I tried and helped children to get into science and technology by showing them stuff like teaching them about privacy, teaching them about network stacks, actually sniffing the network of the school by tapping into it with Wireshark. But we also did some other cool stuff. So we created fonts for Nokia screens. We made software to solve puzzle games, and the one on the bottom right is a box, since my grandfather made a box for me for Christmas, where there was like bells and lights and batteries and switches. I wanted to make a box in his honor, to inspire the children as well. So now that we have the Raspberry Pi, I use this as the core of this box. So the box was a Raspberry Pi button box. It has all kind of features: switches, bells, whistles, screens, printers, coin collectors. So this box just had sensors, and the idea was make people love to learn by creating their own software. So what you could do is, like, if you want to have a poem printed, you have to like insert £1.50 or $3.50 or €1.60. So you had to train the coin collector to recognize the coin and create some mathematics about it to accept like the different coins as values for your program. But instead of just learning a language to learn a language, it's always more cooler and more inspiring to learn a language to make it have a specific goal. Like I learned how to do Bluetooth by hacking Bluetooth glasses, or the children learned how to do binary and hexadecimal by yeah, creating their own fonts. So what I did for my kids, as my grandfather did for me, is create like a scrapbox. So there was a computer sloopkist in Dutch, which is a computer demolition box. So whatever was in the box, they could just take out, use hammers, use saws, use whatever tools they had to tear it apart. And when they became older, they started like soldering, and it made sure that they were not afraid of technology. So whenever you have scrap laying around, this is not scrap. Your scrap is another person's treasure. So I had someone come over yesterday to bring me their old NAS and to bring me their old set-top boxes for me to tear apart and to see how it works. So that really works. And usually when people did this workshop or an hardware hacking training, they tend to run to the thrift shop to buy anything with an electrical cord and tear it apart to see how it works. So one of my boys, Jurre, has hacked his school, but not hacked it without consent. He hacked it with consent. So as he was finished with his mathematical lessons early, he got the permission to look at the school security setup. So he made some agreements up front, like I will not tell this to anyone else before it is fixed. I will only inform my father to see what any of the solutions could be. And there's a video, so if you go to YouTube and search for Jurre and Hack, you will find a video where he hacked his school using a lunchbox for cloning the cards and do all kind of other stuff. So it's not about hacking the school, it's more about the consent, doing responsible disclosure, bug bounty, that kind of stuff. So that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and he's now 18. He just joined the university, and he built his Python CPU. So he built a CPU in the language Python, so something that mimics the functionality of CPU. So you can write in your own assembler, and the Python will interpret it and yeah, make that work. So I started streaming due to COVID, and this is one of the last streams that we did, where he shows what he did and how he did it and why he did it. So I will show the link to the stream later. So first, taking a sip of water. The thing with hardware security, I don't know if you've seen Sean's kickoff this morning. He was talking about the 90s in software security. I tend to go as far as the 80s for hardware security. So for me, most of the hardware security feel like I'm in the 80s for software security. So a lot of the devices are seen as trusted because people won't open them. Well, people do open them now. And in the past, they used to open them to maybe add functionality or maybe upgrade it a little bit. But now people tend to hack them for like their own commercial wins. So that they create their own botnet, that they make ransomware, that they steal intellectual property, that kind of stuff. But we still see these devices popping up on the market, like the baby monitor that was as secure as a paper bag. Why is it that the devices that pop into the market are less secure? Well, there's some reasons. Like you need to be first in market. So IoT is booming. New devices pop up, and whenever you have the most people buying your product, you're a market leader, and the others are like, unless they have some really advantage in functionality, people are probably going to buy the device that is already well known in the market. Like just whenever you tend to sell the first fax back in the time, no one will buy it unless a lot of people will have it, and people will tend to buy the same fax machine. There's another thing. So if you add security, you will add costs. So there's cost because people need to spend more time to look at security. The chips that you use might actually be more expensive because there's hardware crypto inside. There's all kind of other stuff. So will you lose your customers because this device is cheaper than this device? You can buy this baby monitor for 300 pounds, but you can also buy it for 20 pounds. So which one will you buy? And you will see that the security, although it is more pricey at the beginning, if you got breached nowadays with the GDPR regulations, you will have serious issues for your companies. there's also the battery that is included. So if you have devices, especially smaller devices, that will include a battery, and you will include hardware, crypto, or over-the-air updates, or other mechanisms that might infect battery life. So people tend to use like functionality over security. Another thing is crypto. So are you really using cryptography in your products, or are you using obfuscation? So this is a XKCD comic where they say get random number. It is for because it was chosen by a fair dice roll. You will see that people are using XOR, which is a simple trick to rotate stuff. Because people are not able to read it, but there's tricks to find it. So if you're using XOR and you have a specific key, and the data that you're trying to encrypt or obfuscate is 0, it will actually show the key itself. So it looks like a solution, but it is not. And these devices have chips. These chips have storage. And if you're not using encryption on the chips itself, I can use a hot air gun, take the chip off, and read its contents to see what is on the chip. And especially the hardware chips do not have the latest technologies. So it will probably either be plain text data or MD5 type of hashing, where you are able to find the password that is related to that user. And if that user is the same for all of the devices, which is the next one, then you basically have to hack them all. So if you're going for the easy solution and just have one device and mirror it a couple of times, and someone gets one of these devices and tears it apart and finds the secrets, then you're able to replicate this over the internet. And yeah, some devices are out in the field and are staying there forever. Like if you have an older phone, either an Android or an Apple phone, it will no longer be updated. So all the latest attacks will still be applicable for the older devices. And even though you want to update, you're not able to update unless you invest extra money in buying the latest device. And sometimes you see that vendors itself say, well, I don't care, have people buy my stuff, I won't support any updates anymore. So if you're not able to update it, even though this device at this moment in time is very secure, it might not be in a week or a year or 10 years if you're still using that. So if you have electronic locks on your door, and this is in no way updated, and these locks are here to stay for like 30 years on the door, and someone finds a vulnerability, yeah, that's really an issue if you break into my house. But what if I have a hotel where I'm using these locks for all of the doors? Or if I have a hotel chain where I'm using these for all of the doors of all of the hotels. So whenever you're buying the stuff, you need to take that in mind as well. Otherwise, you have to replace all the locks if you're not able to update them, and people are getting stolen because you are using vulnerable locks on your doors. Well, you see a lot of measures by people to obfuscate security. So what they do is they bring in special security screws. They have warranty void seals on the devices. You see that pins are being obfuscated, but companies like iFixit will sell you and will show you the videos on how to repair your iPhone. What devices to buy, what screwdrivers you need to open them, what tools that you need. So just putting a sticker on the box will not make it secure. So that will prevent you from swapping a device because someone opened it. So it might have some commercial value, but not in a security manner. And even though if you Google on how to circumvent these measures, like using a hairdryer will allow you to remove the sticker and place it back on after you open the device. So what you see is that a lot of these older devices or cheaper devices, it's probably open the device, maybe you need a special screwdriver, connect 3 wires, press Ctrl+C, and then you're root. You're in control of this machine. You're able to look at the data that is on the devices, look at the source code, so you will. So where if you do software testing, you start up a program on your network and run Nessus, for instance, or have a Kali VM, assess this specific computer and see if there's like things that you can find. And maybe there's a /admin/ a WP admin on this device and it will find it. But now instead of just poking it and see whenever it reacts, you are on the other side of the device and you can actually just list all the all the files that are on the device, and you can see what user is running those. So if this is like a high privilege user such as a root, this makes it vulnerable. And if it's like running a simple scripting language to handle all the things inside the router, like ping $1, then you could actually inject security faults by just adding a semicolon and giving a command to it. So it needs to be better. So if you look at it, yeah, there's ways to, if you have it like properly secured, then still there's ways to find ways in. So what you could do is like tap into the communication between different chips. So if you have like a CPU or MCU chip that's like the processor that does all the logic, and there's like some memory chips that are encrypted, and there's another device that has the encryption keys. You could actually solder wires to this device to eavesdrop on the signal to see what is the CPU asking from the TPM chip, and how is this related to the data that is on the memory chip. Sometimes you see that there's data or information leaked through the release notes. So if someone tells you that this is the new version and we did bug fixes, that's good. But if they specify what the bug fixes are, it will make it very easy for the people that are reversing it or looking at the vulnerability or even exploiting these vulnerabilities to see what is going on. Like this one will add encrypted to it. So if you have like the previous one, it's unencrypted. So if you download the previous version of this specific firmware, you're able to just unzip the file and see all the data inside it. While if you do that on this one, you won't be able to do that. So maybe if you take the old firmware and take the code out, this is something that still applies to the newer version, which will give you a head start. So yeah, be careful with sharing whatever it is you do, or make sure that your customers are up to date before you reveal that information. And this is like, I like to listen to Darknet Diaries, the podcast, and that has some great stories about where Microsoft coped with the issue. If we're going to release this patch, people will going to reverse engineer this patch to see what the flaw was in the version, making our product even more vulnerable. So people should either update immediately, or we should not, or we should wait for a more strategic moment in time to release the patch. But it's hard to make proper decisions on these ones. That's not something that I want to do by myself. By the way, I tend to aim for like the technology side, and there's other stuff as well. So what you see here is like some devices are set up with default passwords, and parts of the stuff that Jure found was like stuff that was installed, hardware, router switches, printers, laptops, were still having the initial passwords. So if you know the vendor, the product, the version number, you will be able to query these products, these hardware types, to see whatever it is that the initial password was. And you can just try this password. And that's the same with using your own password. So if you're using passwords and you're using these passwords on more systems, people are able to just download these passwords in plain text that have been compromised in the past. And people will try these passwords on systems that are not breached, but might still have the same password. And it's the same with hardware. And another thing is like, stuff is exposed now. So there is a Google for hardware, and they call it the Google of the refrigerators, which is called Shodan. And Shodan allows you to query hardware that is online. So it spiders the entire internet and tries to find other ports than just the normal web ports. So it's other ports like 80 or 443 or 8080, but like is port 21 on, and 21 is the FTP port. So you might find an open file server on that machine, or is port 3389 on, so you're able to do a remote desktop on that machine. And they go as far as already showing you a screenshot of what it would look like if you connect to that device. So you are breaking the law if you are trying to get in at that way. Like for the Netherlands, that will result or could result in a jail sentence of 4 or 5 years, or a fine of 20,000 euros for breaking into a system that is not yours. But these search engines are there. So by saying, well, no one knows this system, that's not true. Your system will be spied. The entire internet will be spied. So if you are not properly protecting yourself with firewall rules, with proper passwords, or not reusing any passwords, that's so much better. And others are other ways they will be weaponized using a network like we saw with the Mirai network. I have some examples of some other attacks. So if you look at hardware hacking, there's like, you can connect using ports that are in the device, either console ports or programming ports. But all these components inside a box with hardware, PCB, like, sorry, the green circuit board with all the components on it, all these components are tested to work on the certain conditions. So they will work on max 0 volt to 5.3 volt. So what would happen if you make that 5.4? Or what would happen if you make that like a negative value? That's the same if you look in software technology and you have like a website and it has this fancy name and it ends with question mark ID is 2. What would happen if you create ID is 2 to an ID is 3? Would you see like the invoice of someone else? Or what would happen if you do ID is -1 or ID is AAAA? So these are the kind of things that you can do with hardware as well. Work a little different. So what you do is like a device sometimes or most of the times has a clock, a crystal, and this will send a pulse for a number of times per second. So 15 megahertz is 15 million pulses per second for this specific device. So what would happen if you would go outside of the scope, so not have an equal 15 million, but like have 10 million or 1 million or 3 instead of 1 million or 40 million. So what would happen to the device? And same is like what would happen if you switch the power during the signals and turn like a 0 into a 1 by adding voltage to the data lines. Or certain devices work like from -20 till +60. What would happen if you overheat them or cool them? So playing with the boundaries of these devices, you're able to inject faults. And there's something else that you see on the screen here, and this is a side channel attack. It's a Tempest attack, is what the name is. And someone on DEF CON showed a setup where using a television stick, you were able to see the images that were on another laptop. So by multiplying the horizontal and the vertical resolution times the refresh rate, you were able to tune into that frequency and see the actual screen using a TV stick that was only 10 euros. So here you would see you could also remove the residue from the chip. So the epoxy coating that is covering the silicon parts to make connections to the chip. Someone in my hackerspace opened up an old chip to see an old Pentium chip to see how it works and create his own microscope to have some imagery on this device to see how the logic works inside this chip. You can even use laser beams on chip to inject faults and swap 1 into a 0 and thus bypassing a login, for instance. And one of the early Raspberry Pis, the Raspberry Pi 2s, had a component inside, U16, which was a device that was used for the power. And if you made a photograph of this specific Raspberry Pi that was running, it would reboot because there was no silicon housing on this chip, and it was vulnerable for light attacks. So by taking a flash photo of the Raspberry Pi would result in the reboot of the device. Other things that you could do is like listen to the power consumption of devices by listening to how the power is being used on the device on a very accurate level. You could actually see what kind of encryption has been used, and even if you're able to reproduce key actions, you could even obtain the key information. So even though you have like proper hardware, security hardware, using these advanced attacks, you will be able to sniff in and obtain key information. So if people are able to get their hands on your hardware, so if it's on your premise, in your secure room, you're all safe. But if these are devices that are in everyone's house and people are tearing them apart, they are able to do these kind of attacks. And I'm a big fan of Live Overflow as well, and he is doing some epic videos on security, on buffer overflows, on fault injection, and he has been doing videos on breaking the encryption. So not only listening into the signals, like this differential power analysis, but also breaking in by doing power glitching. So by creating short circuits in time to turn a 0 into a 1 or a 1 into a 0. So if you are a hardware manufacturer and you're having your hardware released, get it tested. So there's a lot of companies that are doing that. Do not send your product out in the market. Do not only do a QA test, also have your devices tested by people that have a security mindset and try to also do stuff that you won't expect. Like you can have people test your software entering dates, and someone will try like a Dutch date, another one an American date. But what if you just type all kind of special characters to see what happens then? So it's like the looking with a security mindset to hardware testing. And I think it's even cooler if you do it yourself. So learn how to test it, and even though it is not your role to do the security test, just attending this hardware hacking workshop or doing a real hardware hacking training will teach you about security, so you're able to grade security reports on the security as well. And as Sean already told earlier, there's also an OWASP on hardware security. So there's things on how the device is logged, how the data is stored in transit, at rest, all these things. So follow the OWASP to look or to test the security. And yeah, same as with Sean, it is not something that you can add at the end. It's not like I have a new product and I add like this fancy lock in my URL and now it's HTTPS, so this entire product is secure. Are you collecting data that you're not supposed to? Because otherwise you're violating the GDPR, and it will have you end up with a major fee that even will make your company bankrupt. So are you storing the data at rest? Are you storing the data in transit? Are you creating your own cryptography, or are you using an XOR thing? All these things need to be part of your system lifecycle. So people need to build the code needs to be reviewed, it needs to be tested, it needs to be patched, and then you go up and down again. So if you look at the different steps in hardware hacking, I've been jumping up and down to the differences, but here are these are the ones that are important. So if you open up a device, there's like the simplest one is just adding the 3 wires. So adding a UART device, which is basically a device that will allow your Windows, Apple, Linux computer to communicate on the chip level. So this will allow you to see the console information and interact with the computer. So the other one is connecting to the JTAG port, and the JTAG port is meant for provisioning the devices, for putting the new software on the device, but also for testing these. But if the fuse bits of the device are not properly set, people will be able to extract the software from your hardware. and create their own hardware using your software. So actually stealing your intellectual property, or extracting your data and then debugging that data, or searching for crown jewels that are in there, private keys, passwords, IP addresses, other secrets. You could read the communication between different components. So there's different protocols, different serial protocols, where a microcontroller or microprocessor is communicating with a memory module or with a encryption module. These are usually two different protocols. It's either I2C, that's I2C, or SPI. And you can just connect wires to the chip, or solder wires to the chip, or clamp on wires to the chip, or to pins nearby, to eavesdrop this data using a logic analyzer, or using even an Arduino, to sniff what is going on in the communication between the different components. You could take off the chips and just read the content of the chips using EEPROM programmers or flash dump hardware. You could inject faults. So this is a chip whisperer. This is one of the entry models, but this allows you to listen to the communication between the chips, even on a voltage level, to see the voltage and the current, to read the data and the consumption of a specific device, to reveal the secrets, like a private key, or encryption mechanism, or inject faults by turning a 1 into a 0. So, are you still with me, or have questions in between? Okay. So what we're going to do now, we're going to deep dive into one of the protocols. And I think if you've seen one protocol, you've seen them all. Same as if you program one language, you've seen them all. It's just a little different in another one. So there's a lot of protocols. So for wireless, you have like Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, LoRaWAN, GSM, Bluetooth, BLE, and for line ones, it's like Modbus, RS232, RS422, RS485. So there's all kind of different protocols, and if you want to know more about those, there's descriptions that you can find by the different either manufacturers or organizations that allow you to see how they work for a specific version. But what I want you to learn is like how this communication works. So this one. For me, communication is like this. So I had sausages for lunch. So these are two cans, and there's like a wire in between, and this allows me to communicate with from one side to another. So one side is talking while the other one is listening, and this is how it works with communication as well. So especially serial communication, where one side is the TX, the transmit, the send, and the other one is the RX, the receive, or RX. And data is being sent using ones and zeros, so logical levels. It's like the power is on and the power is off. And if a 1 it means like 5 volts, that could be, but could also be 3.3 volt or 1.8 volt. So there's different ways of telling what is a 1 and what is a 0. Then that differs per protocol. So here you see the data being transmitted over the line. So the data is first in a buffer, and then this buffer is sent over the other over the line. And because of that buffer, like the middle part is rotated. So this was just a little animation to show you why the bits are in a different order. So as an example, I want to show the communication between an old computer, a PDP-11, and a Windows computer. So the PDP-11 is using BSidec, which is like something that we had before ASCII, and it is communicating over a serial port. And the serial port is the 9-pin port that was on the back of your computer, and it is identified as COM, communication. So it could be either COM1, COM2, COM3, depending on how many of these ports you have inside of your computer. I'm using PuTTY as the software here, and the speed is in baud. So since there's only 3 wires, so there's a ground wire, there's an RX and a TX. So the RX on one side should be connected to the TX on the other, and the TX on one side should be connected to the RX on the other, just like the tin can. And because there's no clock, you do not know when the 0 starts and the 0 ends. So if we have no clock signal, we have to make a clock ourselves. And we can create a clock by using a protocol, using predetermined agreement, where you say, I will be sending the data on 1200 baud, 1200 bits per second. And this is like 120 characters that I will be sending each second. So the other end should not be listening at 2400 baud, but also at 1200 baud. Otherwise, you will be sending or receiving different information. So these two ends need to line up. So I'm saying we're sending 1200 bits per second. My data bits are 7 instead of the normal 8 that we use now. And we're using 2 stop bits, and we're using even parity and even flow control, request to send, clear to send. So first thing that we see is if we take a multimeter and measure the voltage on that line, then we measure between the ground and the transmit one on the sending computer. We measure a voltage. Let's say it's 5 volts. So it is set to a 1 at this moment. So there's like 1, 1, 1, but it hasn't been started yet. So it needs a start bit first. So my start bit will actually pull the 1 that is being sent to a 0. So my first 0 is actually the start of this character that I'm sending over the line. Then it's sending the bits for the capital letter S over the line. And at the end of it, it is sending a parity. And a parity bit, we're not using these anymore, but a parity bit is actually a way to check the integrity of the data, where we now use hashing to see if you're downloading a large ISO file, there's like the SHA hash or MD5 hash to see if you downloaded your ISO file correctly and there were no like hiccups in the line making this file unusable. This is like the same thing, but not for an entire file, but just for one character. So that's the reason that we're not using it anymore. We're testing it on a larger scale. But back in the days, we were using this to make sure that the data was coming in correctly. So, and there's different ways. So it's not like MD5 or SHA, but it's just counting the number of ones over the line. So we have set it to even. So on one side, creating a parity bit with the setting even, and on the other end of the line, interpreting it with the setting of even. If there's like the number of ones is even, it should be a 0. And so there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 ones. So this should be a 0. If this had be a 1, or if one of the other ones was a 0, then this would not be matching up, resulting in an error at the other end of the line. So knowing that the data was corrupted. So we'll show CRC, no, not CRC error, but the data corrupted of some kind. And then there's the 2 stop bits, and this is basically like the spaces between words. So this is to indicate this character is stopped, is transmitted. Now we wait a little while, and now we are sending the next one. And you can send these to 1, 1.5, and 2. So why 1.5? Sorry. You can send them to 1.5 because it doesn't matter how long it is. It could be 1.1 because the next character or next byte that you will be sending starts with a 0. So it can be 1 as long as you want because it starts with a 0 again, as you will see here. So important, do not talk at the same time with the toucans. Do not listen at the same time with the toucans. So you need to connect one end to the RX and the other end to the TX, and vice versa. So what's this thing with hardware handshaking? So back in the days when we had modems, so you connected a modem to a telephone line, and there was like all this beeping thing going on. Your computer needed to know if someone was ringing, for instance. So if you, let me see if I can bring up a mouse. There was a RI, like pin 9, which was showing that someone was calling you. So there was like a light flashing, someone is calling me, and will show like a ring, ring, ring in my logging on my computer. Then I could say answer the phone, so send a special command, AT is a hash command set, and A for answer the phone for me. And then it would try to negotiate if both had the same baud rate. So are you like 1200? No. Are you like 2400? No. Let's talk 300 on each channel. Yeah, works. And now we have a connection. And if they had a connection, call the carrier, then this pin 1 would show that there was like a standing connection. There was like communication possible between the both ends. But because computers at that time were so slow, there was like a stop. You need to stop with communication so I can process all the data. You can continue. Just like a flag on an airplane taxiing them to the correct spot. So these flags are 2 wires that are crossed to tell one side you have to stop communicating. You can start, and the other one can do that too. And you could either do that using request to send and clear to send, but also data set ready, data terminal ready. Sometimes you only had the 3 wires and not more cables, and you still needed to somehow halt the communication. And for that situation, they had software handshaking. So if you look at PuTTY and Minicom and Serial, you see that except for non-RTS and DSR, there's also X-on, X-off. And X-on, X-off is actually a character in the ASCII character set that you can send to stop the communication over serial. So if you would send like Alt 19 as a command, you would actually pause the communication between the serial communication. And if you press Alt 17, it will continue. So that's Control S or Control Q or Alt 19 or Alt 17 or hex 13 or 11. So there's different ways for explaining that. But X-on, X-off is software handshaking. Right. So you see that if both ends do not have the same speed, it will measure in a different way. So where the 115,200 baud one has like each section a different measure point for testing if it is a bit high or bit low, or 1 or 0. For half of the speed, it will measure like double the size of the interval. So that will read something completely different. So there's a CTF at the end of this presentation where you are able to experience whatever we learned here and do this on your own computer. So you don't need any hardware. You can just use a browser to test the how it works to hack a specific hardware. So inside the computer is a clock, and the clock will tick for a number of cycles per second. So this clock is set for 1,843,200 ticks per second. So if you divide this one in to 2, 4, 8, you will come up with certain numbers that are magical. So these magical numbers will be used for configuring devices. So what you see is like I'm using like 115200. That is something that you see a lot with newer devices. And even with very new devices, you will see 230 or 921. But if you look at older devices or switches that you need to configure, you might run into 9600 or 19,200. Or if you have a fax, it's 4800. So these values are derived from this component that is in the computer. This is a crystal. And by dividing that into different parts, you're able to come up with this solution. This is a little bit about the protocol. So now you've seen how these protocols work. It's just sending data from one end to another, where you have a certain agreement on how you send the data in bits, how a certain character is represented in a number of ones and zeros, and how to stall the data and continue the data. But there's also another part of hardware hacking. So what I do, if I start hardware hacking, I do reconnaissance or analysis first. So I open up the box and I take pictures. I take pictures of the device when it's still closed. Even I take pictures of the box itself that's unopened. Then I look at the security screws. I look at seals that are there. So am I able to open the box without people knowing that I opened the box? Or do I need to Dremel my way into the device, and will people immediately see that I tampered with it? So if you have a PIN terminal to make a payment in a shop, and you see that there are holes drilled into the device, you will not trust it. Well, if it still has the seals on it, and if it's still closed and it looks okay, then you trust the device. So is there any tamper measurement applied to this device? Whenever I do my hardware hacking assignments, like time is my worst enemy. So time in the amount of hours that I get to test a certain device, hours, days, people, depending on what device I got. But this I can bend a little bit to my advantage. So if there's something that I am not able to do within scope, and I really want to finish that thing that I found, then I might stay a little bit longer at the office and dive into it and make it work. But sometimes they have a deadline where they turn off the production environment, so I'm no longer able to connect with the backend. Or after this installation, this will be released to the companies that will print the device or create the device or assemble the device. So if the time between the contract and the actual assignment might sometimes even be a month. And sometimes I open up the box and I see a certain device here. Like if you see the pins on the right, those have a higher width between them than the ones on the right. So the ones on the left are 2.54 millimeters, while the ones on the right is 2 millimeters. So if I do not have the pin headers for this one, it will be hard for me to make a connection to this one. I might need to order that from China, from America, from whatever, and that will cost me a lot of time. So what I do is devices that are regulated by the FCC, and that is devices for the American market that emit radio signals that need to be registered by FCC. So if you go to fcc.io and you type in the FCC ID that is on the back of your device or in your phone or on your computer or on your router, then you're able to read all the security reports of that specific device. And that will include the setup where they tested the radio frequency radiation in a cage of Faraday, but will also include like the manual of this device and the workings, but also the circuit board. So if I am going to work on a specific device, then, and I know this device has a radio component in them, I ask for the FCC ID so I can already do some reconnaissance based upon the circuit boards that I see, because I can now already see there's like chips, there's larger chips, there's smaller chips, there's chips with 8 pins, with 16 pins, and maybe I can even read the signing that's on the chip to find out whatever it is it does. By the way, this is a Lego EV3 module that has been torn apart. So by just looking at an FCC ID, you will be able to see how this device is tested and how it is working without having to open it. Another thing is, if it is a router, there's probably someone, especially when it's a consumer-based router, it is connected, it's probably documented on OpenWRT. So OpenWRT is a website, open source website for open source router firmware, and what you see there is tricks to make the hardware run into programming mode, so you can program that specific open source router firmware on your closed source router. So this will show you special tricks. It will show you where the JTAG is, will show you where the UART is, will show you how to force the device into a programming mode. So that could be an interesting as well. Another thing is the datasheet. The datasheet is like a manual, 600 pages, that will show you what the components are of the chip, how to program those, what the ranges are in the chip. So what is the temperature that is optimal for this chip, and what will introduce faults when it's too high or too low. But also, like if I look at a certain pin of a chip, then I can also find this is the pin that will give me a console if they did not properly configure it, or will allow me JTAG if they did not set the security bits properly. So when I look at the chips inside a device, I look at the form factor. So I try to make it as simple as possible. So if you look at the device, and let's go another way, these are bigger chips. These are smaller chips with 8 pins. These are rectangular chips, pins on the long side, pins on the short side. These are the chips that I'm interested in. So I'm interested in all the black components with at least 8 pins, basically. And I take a picture of all of these and find that data sheet to tell me if they're storage, or if they're memory, or if they're like computing power of some sort. So for the EEPROMs, the one on the right is like ancient. So you will find these in like traffic light installations, or like very old industrial machines. These chips need to be emptied by using ultraviolet light. So you need to physically remove these devices, put them in a box with an ultraviolet lamp inside, and then you can reprogram them. So upgrading the software on these devices is sending an engineer to that installation, have him take out the old chip, put in the new chip, and it's running on the new version of the software. So there's a glass window on this chip, and this glass window allows you to erase it. But since the normal daylight also contains ultraviolet light, you need to place a sticker on top of it so it will not be accidentally erased. So usually that sticker will contain a version number, like this is version number 1.0 or 1.2 of this specific software that we're using for that specific installation. But since upgrading software by sending a mechanical engineer around is very expensive, we decided to create newer chips which are electrically erasable, programmable read-only memory chips. So this is basically a ROM chip, something that you actually cannot change easily. But it can be upgraded through some upgrading process. But this is not like RAM where you constantly read and write data from. And these chips usually have a 24 or 25 in their version number, or in their model number. So the 24 means it's I2C, which is one protocol, and the other one is 25, which means it's SPI, which is the other protocol. So why is this important that it's like a 24 or 25? First of all, because it makes it easier to identify the chip that you want, because this will contain the firmware that you might want to extract. And the other way is like the SPI chips are ones where you can just clamp on probes to read it without desoldering it. While the I2C chip, you need to desolder the chip and put it into a special socket to read the data from it. So the chips on the above are the chips that contain logic of some kind. It could be either Wi-Fi chip or Bluetooth chip, or microcontroller, microprocessor, FPGA, which is like programmable controller. So this, if it's a microcontroller, an MCU, it probably contains a EEPROM inside as well. Maybe even contains logic inside as well. So these are the chips that you would attack using JTAG by extracting all the data, extracting all the intellectual property. The ones on the left, if they have pins on the long side, they're not that interesting because it's memory. And if you turn off the power, memory is gone, basically. And the ones on the short side, those are the storage. So these are the chips that you will find in an SD card, in a USB stick, in an SSD device. So whenever you turn a device on, the one with the pins on the long side is empty, and the one with the pins on the right side, yeah, it's like your hard disk. This is where your data resides, and that you can use after rebooting again. So this is where your pictures are, where your data is. Well, the EEPROMs that also contain data, those will have like the settings. So will it boot from the hard drive, or will it boot from the USB stick? So there's usually smaller kinds of information, like serial number, license number, while the other one is like a large chunk of data. So looking at the device, I could also look at the circuit board. So what you see is if you look at the PCB, all the dark green parts are non-conductive and all the light green parts are conductive. And the white is just ink to explain it, or paint. And what you see is some of the pins are small and others are larger. And you will see, like with the switches, there's even pins that are connected to the entire surface. So by looking at these circuit boards, you can already see, like, if it's connected to the entire surface, this is a ground pin. So this is my negative pin for my computer. So if it's like a larger one, like the +5 volt here, this is a power pin. So, and you need both to power up the device. And if it's like smaller pins, it's probably data. So by looking at the size of the lanes on the circuit boards, you're already able to see and identify what they are used for. So you can do it by using measuring as well. So I created a special method for myself. So what I do is I turn off the power, I connect the multimeter to the to one of the metally shiny parts of the circuit boards, and I probe each and every pin while the multimeter is on the continuity setting. And I call this the Wi-Fi setting because it has like these audio waves on it. So this means that it beeps whenever there's continuity between one pin and another one. So it has a connection. So these are connected, these two lines. That's the first one. So I first identify all the ground pins, and then I turn on the device while I probe a pin that's not ground, and that could result in a reading, while my multimeter is of course on the voltage setting, for 0 volt, for 3.3 volt, for 5 volt, or it could be fluctuating. And if it's fluctuating, you will probably see data coming by because it's like high, low, high, low. These are like the ones and the zeros that are dropping by. So why do we need to measure the ground pin? We need to measure the ground pin because the voltage is different, potential difference. So if you have a fan inside your computer, these are connected through 2 cables, and usually there's like a small connector to it that allows you to connect it to one of the molexes, and the molexes are used to connect a hard drive to your computer. This is like for the older hard drives. So the black pins are the ground pins, the red ones are 5 volt, and the yellow ones are 12 volt. So by connecting between a black one and a red one, you have 5 volt. Between a black one and a yellow one, you have 12 volt. But you could also connect them between the yellow and the red one, and that would have the difference of 12 volt and 5 volt, meaning 7 volt. So instead of having your fan run slow or fast, you even have like a medium setting by doing this this way. So if you're not measuring the correct ground pin, you will probably not measuring the correct signal. So if something is 0 volt at the start, and it will show a 5 volt, and you're measuring another 5 volt pin, the difference between those 5 volt pins is 0 volt. So your multimeter is showing 5 volt while you're measuring between 2 5 volt pins. So by having the correct ground pin, you will always measure the correct voltage. And reading the voltage is halfway to reading the data. So this is the Wi-Fi setting. This is like audio signals. I call it the Wi-Fi setting. It has nothing to do with Wi-Fi, but you use this setting because it will beep whenever there's a connection between 2 pins. So you don't have to watch your multimeter. You can just watch your circuit board and listen to the beeps. So I was talking about 5 volt, about 3.3 volt. This actually depends on the chips that you are using. So it could be that, like in the first example, a 0 is actually a signal from 0.5 to 1.5, and a 1 is actually a signal from 3.5 to 4.44. But could also be that you have a device that's 5 volt, but also 3.3 volt tolerant. So this has a higher tolerance for the 1 pin, so that's 2.0 till 4.44. So this kind of chip works on both signals. But what is important is that you're using the proper equipment for the proper router. And on my YouTube channel, I have a video explaining on how to actually connect those cables together. That will help you get through there step by step. So if you're seeing the fluctuating data, the variable data, you're actually Neo in the subway seeing the matrix. So you will see the code. And you could also make that visible by connecting a logic analyzer to it and interpreting the ones and zeros to read it. So almost at the end. So this is slide 103 of 107. So it has been a fast walkthrough in hardware security. As of the start of COVID, I have been shipping out I void warranties for a living stickers. So if you're into stickers and are not able to go to conferences, I will gladly send them to you everywhere. If you are into hardware hacking and like gadgets, take a picture of this this slide. It contains the YADOC 666 URL, and this is the a PDF, 600 pages, that will have like every gadget that you will ever need for doing hardware hacking, for doing pen testing, for doing wireless attacks. It's like red teaming, blue teaming. It will discover people that are trying to hack your system. It's very cool. I think I have 1/3 of this list, and I have a lot of stuff, but very cool list. And these are the links to the YouTube channel. So they're all the same, but I'm broadcasting Saturday 1900 BST, and on that channel is how to do JTAG, how to do a UART connection to your router, even how to communicate over laser beams, creating your own telephone. So if you're into geeky stuff, this is something that you might like to see. So to get you started, you do not need a lot of stuff. So like 15 euros is enough to get there. You need a multimeter that has like the Wi-Fi setting. The one on the top right is the FTDI, and the FTDI is a device that allows to communicate between a computer and digital pins on a device. And this one works for 5 volt and 3.3 volt. So I think 95% of the devices use these voltages. I included some Dupont cables. These are the 2.54 millimeter connections that you need to connect to a router or a set-top box or whatever. And this is on the top right, bottom right, is a banana connector to a crocodile clamp. And this allows you to put this into the multimeter and connect it to the Dupont cable to have like a firm connection. I have a workshop, but I also have a scavenger hunt. So I was like sucked into this scavenger hunt. So for the scavenger hunt, if you can send me a picture of a communication device that I just created for yourself to me on Twitter at yillis.com, I will send you, for the first 10 people that do that, a circuit board that you can solder yourself to any address of choice. So that's like something simple and a gimmick. And the other one is this one. And this is a CTF. So if you go to this address, https:// portal.hackathon.org, and you need an invite code to start, and the invite code is 558A8. So that will allow you entrance on this CTF portal for this specific challenge. And this will take you from the part that you connected to the wires, and you need to establish the baud rate. So take a picture of this or snapshot or whatever of this slide, because this will be helpful, as this will include the different baud rates that you can try. It will include the passwords that you might need to enter somewhere. So this device has vulnerability, it uses default passwords. You can search those. And there's real crypto in there, but people left their private key on the machine. You might need to Google that on your computer. So that should get you started. So enjoy. Yeah, if you have questions, you can ask those via Slack, via Slido, via Twitter, whatever you need. And if you have questions, please ask them. Feel free.
All right, thank you for that. That was really interesting. There's a lot of information. I tried to follow along.
It's
definitely
a lot of information in 2 hours. Yeah.
But very, very interesting. I learned a lot, and plenty of places to get started. Could you just repeat the thing you said about the Twitter, not the CTF, but what was the other thing?
This one, the scavenger hunt.
Yeah, what did you want us to do?
So the idea is I have 10 circuit boards that needs to be soldered, and if I click on this is how it is supposed to be, but this is very fast. And I will send those to people that will show me a picture on Twitter of this communication device. So if you have like 2 cans and a piece of wire in between, and send me a picture of that with a reference to B-Sides Newcastle, I will send that you are one of the 10, and will ship it to any address of your choice.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like a gimmick. So I had a lot of fun getting all kind of stuff out of my house for a scavenger hunt that we had here. So I want to include one in the hardware hacking training as well. So cool. Yeah, if you want, you can join this one. It is yeah. You should be able to do it, and if you are stuck somewhere, just reach out and I will help. So this should be fun.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. One more question.
Yeah.
Will you upload the slides onto anywhere?
Did not talk about it, but could do. I need to talk with the organization to find a place to upload these.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? I saw exclamation mark connecting audio. Do not hear anything yet. Let me meanwhile look at my Slack. Okay. In the Slack channel of Workshop Hardware Hacking, there's also the unroll where I show the contents of my hardware hacking box. So these are all the gadgets that I carry around, like a soldering iron and a multimeter, like a very tiny one. So this is a Twitter feed I posted a little while ago, and someone today made an unroll thread for it, so you could even download it as PDF if you want. So I'm using Twitter a lot. Twitter for me is an environment where I'm able to learn from the experts and that are really helpful. So if you get out all the drama out of your bubble, it can be a very cool place where you learn a lot, and where people help you, where you can help people. And I'm on Twitter for I think 11 years, and it brought me a lot. It brought me more than LinkedIn, by the way, even from a business perspective. It even got me my job, Twitter, 5 years ago. So I'm hanging around here. So if you have questions, just feel free.
Okay, well, I have to get going, but thank you again very much, and I'll be in touch about the other stuff.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your interaction. It's always cooler to have people like asking questions and having the interaction. Really.
No, I teach at university, and if you give like a lecture or anything and all the students are blank, it's very awkward.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd just show up as a human responding. So. Yeah, it's awkward.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right,
really
nice to meet you. Thank you again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.